Hey guys, Louie here, and welcome back to Acorn Hill. I'm preparing for a backyard project, a backyard DIY that I planned a couple of months ago. It's a backyard patio DIY that I planned on installing on the west garden. My next door neighbor is getting rid of retaining wall blocks that I figured I could use. So here's the west side garden. Salvage retaining blocks are the ones on the bottom, which I've already laid down to form the footprint of the second patio that I'm building in this section of the garden. Also, to recap on that previous post, what we did was moved an existing in-ground sprinkler head to a different direction and position. After laying down the retaining wall blocks for the footprint of the patio, I used a sharp garden spade to remove the sod. I excavated a 5-inch deep base plus the thickness of the paver stones. All this extra material I had to dump to a low spot somewhere in the backyard. I didn't have any extra rubble to use for the base layer, and that could get really costly. So I thought, what could be the cheapest hack for the base layer for this patio? Well, the answer is simple: crushed hollow blocks. Crushed cinder and hollow blocks were a good filler and stabilizer for this space. Time to add bagged crushed gravel on top of the crushed hollow blocks and cinder blocks. In this new layer, I made sure I rake evenly all over the place. And with everything all in place, I packed it down with a hand tamper to form a stable, firm, level layer over the patio space. I used the hand tamper to settle the gravel in between the cracks and crevices formed by the cinder blocks. With a layer of crushed gravel already leveled for this part of the project, next thing that I did was put more gravel along the irrigation trench that I did on a DIY project, relocating the sprinkler head. I used a piece of pressure-treated wood to carefully comb and level this area so that there won't be any lumps along the way when I use the sand right on top of it. Time to put the builder sand on top of the crushed gravel area. Spread the builder sand 1 to 2 inches deep right on top of the gravel. I also made sure that the grade of the layer is sloped, with the grade moving away from the retaining wall for drainage. And again, I used the hand tamper to create a smooth surface for the patio pavers that will go on top. Here's a batch of pavers that I will be using for this project. I got them on sale at a discounted price from a local big box store. An even combination of brown, gray, and clay. This would be the good color combination for the retaining wall blocks that was given to me by my neighbor. Beginning on one side of the space, I began laying the first paver stone. I choose to follow a subway pattern for the pavers on this patio. And if you've seen my other video for the first patio that I did earlier, I prefer my patios to be casual with mixed materials on it. For our preference, a mixed material patio isn't too strict and way too formal. We already have our stone retaining wall for that. Plus, I don't own an angled grinder to cut the stones for the irregular shaped spots. This part of the build took me a while to finish. I took my time with this part of the project. I place, replace, reposition, remodify the base layer, and used a rubber mallet to position the patio pavers along with the spirit level to make sure that the entire space has the proper grade that I want. At the transition point and junction between the patio and the retaining wall, I choose to make this a very informal spot. What I'm doing here is removing some of these weeds, which later on I will cover with polymeric sand to prevent them from growing. Some of the pavers I had to position freehand, some of them I had to position following the subway pattern, but it doesn't really matter. There's no rules. This part of the patio won't be seen visibly because I have that big blue adirondack bench that will cover this side of the patio. And because I don't own an angled grinder, those irregular spots between the junction, I simply fill them with pea-sized gravel in keeping with the casual look that we want for this part of the garden. And here along the front, where you see the retaining wall blocks given to me by my neighbor, the subway pattern of the patio, I'm simply filling in the irregular sized, irregular shaped, negative spaces of the patio with pea gravel. We really like the juxtaposition between the strict look of the subway pattern, the casual look of the gravel, plus the rustic edge provided by the retaining wall blocks. So for us, this is a win. After being satisfied with the pattern that I made, the last thing to do is spread polymeric sand right on top using a sweeper. Polymeric sand is sand containing synthetic materials that once wet and dried, this will bind everything that I've put from top to bottom. It will bind the patio pavers, it will bind all the gravel, and it will bind it underneath for the base layer that we created for a couple of days. And there you have it. All I have to do is round up the adirondack bench along with a good grouping of pots, and this latest DIY is what I consider all buttoned up. Hey guys, Louie here. I'm in the backyard preparing for a planting project. What I have here are Gaura that I got from the nursery 2 weeks ago that are still in the nursery pots. Haven't planted them yet, and I plan on doing that today. On my work area also is a resin pot, an old one that I painted gray to change the color from terracotta. And what I'm going to use is a good mixture of potting soil, topsoil, a lot of perlite, and a lot of good compost. I had some leftover perlite from the propagation project that I did, so I'm just going to dump that straight into the pot and then fill this up also with a good amount of fresh perlite. Perlite is very good in helping drainage and helping the body and the looseness of the soil, the planting medium. And that soil friability along with the compost and the nutrients that the plants will absorb is what's going to make this planting composition a good one. I prefer buying perlite in bulk. This is a big sack that I got from Amazon. This gives me the independence and the liberty to be able to create my own mix for different plants. Gaura's strict requirement in growing them and keeping them in the garden is to be planted in loose soil. So that increased friability of the soil is what's important, along with the compost that I'm mixing in. It's easy to mix, and perlite is a lightweight material, almost similar to ground up styrofoam, but it does give that soil mix good aeration and a lot of looseness so that water just passes through it. With shades of white and pink blossoms, these perennials are also called wandflower because the flowers are attached to stalks that look like a wand. These perennials lend a subtle airy color and appearance to any garden, and that's why Kat and I really prefer this on any garden bed. Most often green, the foliage also comes in soft burgundy, which is apparent during fall and early winter. Here, I'm placing 5 individual nursery pots of Gaura to create a big clump. Gaura are well adapted to drought and can stand up to tough growing conditions. The only thing that they hate is having wet soil. With this composition, I'm expecting the height to be at 1 to 3 feet tall, and it could go to 1 to 2 feet wide, so it will definitely fit this entire pot. It blooms on all 3 seasons but winter. It's deer resistant, very low maintenance, and with all of this, it's also good for attracting pollinators and birds. With all these qualities, for $1.99 per pot, this is a good deal. Potting the Gaura couldn't be any easier. I filled the pot with my own potting mix, used the Espoma Biotone starter fertilizer to give it a good boost in the early stages of growth, topped it off with my own potting mix again. I'll give it a good drink of water, select a location in the backyard where it will receive full sun, and I'll let it take off for the rest of the growing season. Gaura is deciduous. That means it will die back in the fall and winter, but come springtime, new shoots will come out, it will double in size, and that's why it's one of our favorite perennials. And there you have it, all potted up. And the only thing missing to make this planting project buttoned up is to put a good mulch right on top of it. This will prevent any unnecessary weeds from growing that could take up more of the nutrients that I've already prepared in my potting mix. And here's the potted up Gaura sitting on top of the retaining wall mixed in with all the other foliage, the green foliage that is very prominent during this time of the year. Next year, this pot will be filled up with a lot of the wand-like structures and foliage from the plant, with a lot of those white blooms, which really gives it good movement when the wind blows in this part of the garden. Another update I wanted to show you is the sweet potato vine that I planted on a previous planting project to cover the base of this pot where I have the FireLight Limelight Hydrangea planted in. Heat allows for this plant to really take off, and as you can see, the west side of the garden right now is not only filled with green, it's vigorously growing. It's good for this season. I hope you liked this video containing different projects that I did in this part of our garden. Could you do me a favor and click on that like button and tap on that subscribe button if you haven't already for more projects coming up. This is Louie coming from the backyard, and we'll see you back here in Acorn Hill.